Beth Comstock, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you. Welcome to the Industrialist Dilemma.
Thank you.
You know, what's interesting is as we've been thinking about this and as we've been working with Max and talking to Max over the past couple of years about the Industrialist Dilemma and this whole kind of concept and issue in general, GE has always sort of come back as like the canonical example of a company that is responding to a whole bunch of challenges of moving from an industrial business to one that is a digitally enabled industrial business, or maybe even a digital first or digital only business over time. So there's a lot that I think we want to get through. So maybe just to kick things off, you're the vice chair of GE. Maybe you could first just describe, you know, what is your purview, what is your job like, and what is the state of GE today?
Well, I'll start with the latter. The state of GE is really strong in a tough market. I mean, a tough world of markets, I guess I should say. Kind of slow to no growth in many of the markets we do business, but you still have to grow. And that's a big part of my job, is to ramp up the growth engines of GE. You have to have new growth. It has to come from new places. Businesses can't stop growing, and that's my mandate, is to help the company figure out how to grow and how to continue to find new ways to grow.
And what, so GE, we just talked about the heritage of GE and the sort of varied businesses that you guys are in, and maybe just like, when did it hit the organization that this whole digital thing was going to transform GE, and how has it been, you know, where are you in the journey, and how has it begun to kind of transform the business? Yeah,
I think it's been sort of, you know, in the background for probably the past decade. And I spent a lot of time in the media world. And I think you start, when you're in GE, because certainly even a decade ago, we had many more businesses and in many more industries than we are now. One of the things that's happened over the past 10 years, we've been had to focus our portfolio. But if you look at sort of the early indicators, you'd have to look at media, where you started to see digitization. Mm-hmm. I was immersed for several years in the middle of all that. You start to see business models changing. You start to see disruption happening. Then you pick your head up and you see, hey, it's starting to happen in healthcare. The digitization of the consumer, of the patient experience. Then a few years later, you start to see little glimmers of it happening in the energy space. And so, you know, you start to connect some dots there. And I'd say for us, probably about maybe 2008, we started to really pick our head up. And really by, you know, 2011 or so, we said, this is serious. And we were doing some experiments and testing. And so for the past 4 to 5 years, it's been redefining the future of the company.
And do you have a way that you can kind of describe how that has redefined the company universally across GE? Because obviously so many different businesses, but like what is the center of all of that?
Well, first we had to say, what does digitization mean to the company? And we saw the opportunity. We had to kind of name it to claim it. We said we see the industrial internet. Mm-hmm. There's been a great consumer internet we've all experienced, but what you haven't yet seen is the internet of industry. Mm-hmm. And so again, as we were seeing these things connected, so we said, okay, we're going to name it and claim it, even though it doesn't exist and we don't know how to get there. Industrial internet, what does that mean? I
have to be honest, from Silicon Valley, we thought you guys were on crack.
Yeah,
so
we
didn't know what you were talking about.
I know. But remember, I don't know if you were at that first big event we had. Were you at the first big event we had?
No, nobody invited me. Yeah.
But it was not far from here. Right. We had a big event, and Jeff M. out on the stage, and Mark Andreessen, and behind him, Jeff, we flew in this huge shell of a jet engine. And Jeff looked at Mark and he said, you know, Mark's big thing, software eats the world, and Jeff looks back and he goes, eat this, Mark Andreessen. So that was sort of the early stages of us trying to define what it meant. And honestly, at that stage, we thought it was either or. It was software versus hardware. And so we embedded it first in our research center, because that was really where we were doing the technical R&D. Can we get the kind of look at what do we need to do? What's the technology that is going to empower and enable this digital world? And then pretty soon thereafter, we had to start empowering sales and marketing teams and getting all the businesses on board. But that's really been the journey of the past. And so to answer your question finally, I'm sorry, but no. I think, so now we know what our destiny is for certainly the next decade or more. We're a digital industrial company. And I think for us, it really is being at that intersection of the digital and the physical world. And I think they're both important.
And it seems like you guys took a remarkably iterative process to kind of get there, because just to kind of continue what I was saying, like at first it looked kind of crazy. Like, what are you guys talking about? Industrial internet, like, it sounds like the internet, but coming from GE or something. So maybe just bigger and more expensive. So, but then it kind of started you could connect the dots of like what the internet could do to the various products you guys had. Did you know what kind of sort of change that would drive within the business at first, or did you actually did it kind of come together in slow pieces?
It's definitely, I think the one thing you know as well as anybody, it's always an iterative. I think generally in companies there's always an iterative process, and it drives people crazy because they expect it to be done. So I think first we had to just understand, do we have the right technology, the sensors and controls? What are the applications?
Right.
What's the opportunity? So one of the first things we did really was just, if that name it, claim it, here's the market, we started to say, hey, we think this is going to unlock a whole new wave of productivity in industry. And we decided, hey, even if we could unlock 1% of productivity, in the healthcare industry, that's $600 million. In the rail business, that's multiple hundreds of millions. And you start to add up, it's like trillions of dollars worth of productivity in the industries we serve. So, hey, there's a market. There are markets there. What are the applications? And so in the early days, it was a lot of goofy applications, to be honest. Right. They were one-offs. Let's just see if we can do it. Then over time, you start to say, hey, an application in rail, actually, we're going to track where our locomotives are. That same application works in a hospital, where you want to track where where the nurse wants to find where all the healthcare pieces of equipment are. So you start to see that disparate pieces actually fit together more horizontally than you think.
But you guys could have sort of delivered that as just, okay, now GE's products are smarter, they're more intelligent, but it seemed like there was an overall business model shift that came along with the industrial internet. What was that shift? And where are you guys in that journey right now? Well,
to one of the points that was raised earlier, there were two shifts. The technology, the hardware engineers are not good at software. So you had to convince them that this was a different kind of engineering capability that had to be embedded. We actually had a lot of software capability in various pieces. We now had to aggregate them, hire more. And then we were totally lost on the commercial side. What are we selling? Right. Are we selling an app? Are we selling a service? We had to get to the point, and someone mentioned it here earlier, that we're selling an outcome. Again, if you're driving productivity, what does it mean? I'm going to give you no unplanned downtime. If you're running a power plant and you don't expect that gas turbine to go down, that's millions and millions of dollars a day. So again, you started to say, what is it? And you could see that across the whole company. So we had to import new software technology and new sales and marketing technology.
And is that something that's sort of fully standardized across the business, or are these sort of unique relationships that you have with a bunch of your customers where you guys get into a room and you say, okay, we're going to save you $2 billion, give us half of that, and then you go on your way? Or is that something that's fully kind of programmatized or productized across the business?
It's a little of both in the beginning. You have to figure it out customer by customer, industry by industry. And I'd say the good news for us is our customers weren't ready either. So we weren't ready and they weren't ready, but we were all ready to see the vision and have the discussion. And we had to come up with a customer maturity model that some of our most sophisticated customers were ready. Most of them weren't ready at all. They didn't even know what we were talking about. Luckily, we didn't either, so it worked out really well. We could take each other along, but that's something you always have when you're kind of making a market. You're dealing with varying degrees of a maturity of your customers. The other thing that's interesting is, who is your customer? Yeah. You're calling in a much higher order. If it's about productivity of operations, you're suddenly becoming a partner in operating a railroad, operating an airline. Your customer is no longer certainly the procurement officer, it's not your service officer, it's the CFO, the CEO, the CIO. So suddenly the CIO is in this really interesting position of doing like operational technology and information technology. So you're also having to change the role of the people that you work with in the customer level.
Did you start this with one group inside of GE, or did you try to roll it out across all the divisions simultaneously?
A little of both. GE is pretty good at doing kind of centralized centers of expertise. And so we brought in the technology and the commercial capabilities, and then everybody tried to tap into that, and it frankly didn't scale. So we had to, just last year, had to come in and say, we don't have enough heft. Everybody's all in. We have one digital center. running it like a business, and they drive the implementation, the commercialization, and then they pivot back to the businesses. That was a huge cultural shift for us.
Have you had to do anything to ensure that that business unit, then that group, is not slowed down by the sort of motions of the overall company?
Yeah, and partly it's co-locating. We have a software center out in the East Bay, and we've now got about 2,500 software engineers and data analysts and all kinds of, as you'd imagine, sophisticated technologists. But we had to say, okay, if you're in healthcare, you have to put your digital team here. The chief digital officer for energy sits in San Ramon, and he has to port back to the power and water business in France, in Schenectady, so that was reestablishing the center of expertise, and now we're a global company, so now we're setting up digital foundries in Shanghai, in Israel, in Europe, in France. So then you have to also figure out how are you distributed to serve global markets. So now we're at that phase.
But did you ever have then these junctures where what the digital team was building, or the software group at the time was building, wasn't competitive either on cost or performance with something that one of those teams could have gotten from the outside market? Did you have to sort of force them to use it anyway for the product development process and improving that, or did you let them go a different direction? How did you deal with the fact that this thing was so early, and how do you let it kind of blossom?
Well, if this gives you any indication, we just released Predix, which is our industrial cloud. We just opened it up for general availability 2 weeks ago. So you might well imagine some of our business units were ready before the industrial cloud was ready. So there had to be a transition plan. So you had to say to the rail business, there's certain things you need to move forward on because your customer's expecting it, but no, at some point we're going to have to manage the cost and the transition. We had to create cloud that is on-premise in the cloud. You had to create secure parts, open parts. We had to partner with that. We do partner with Amazon Web Service to get some of that speed. So you had to come up with a real mosaic of options, if you will, for the business units. Sometimes they did it better. So over time, they had to know this centralized Predix stack is where they're going to be, and they had to figure out how to manage to that.
I think we want to get a lot more into the Predix business model and that because that's a pretty interesting example of you guys kind of inventing a new software business on top of the GE kind of core. But before we do that, if you move into a model where you are selling outcomes for your customers and you are a service provider, not just selling a product, do you ever run into issues where now you're competing with previous partners or suppliers in your industry that were a step between you and the customer or the ultimate product? How have you guys navigated that?
I'd say we're navigating it now. And it rings in a whole new, I mentioned earlier that CIO, who's now super important to us, and they are making critical decisions, and they're being called on by SAP, IBM, GE. And everybody thinks it's a IT solution when actually we're offering an OT solution. So partly you have to kind of duke it out a little bit.
Okay.
And for us, it was coming with the operational expertise, not trying to do an ERP implementation.
Right.
Like, we're not good at that, but we're good at what we're, so you do find that kind of conflict. Because none of us really have figured out what it means in the industrial internet. So we had to work through that. We still are.
And I assume you even can then compete with many of the system integrators, the Accentures of the world, people who had to package all this up together, or is that?
I think we partner more with those. I think you're seeing us do a lot more with Accenture, Capgemini, some of those kind of systems integrators. And at some point we may face that as a question to ask, should we be doing that? Right now we're partnering.
But so that's an example of you guys competing with sort of ostensibly partners, previous partners. What about, do you ever find yourself competing with like the actual end customer of your technology because you're jumping a step ahead of them in terms of delivering that integrated solution?
Yes and no. I mean, sometimes the more sophisticated customers that have the sophisticated IT or OT teams that can do their own apps, sometimes you're in competition with them. But again, if you're opening your platform, your cloud up to them, you basically say, build it. Great. We'd love you to build it. Just build it here. We don't need to build everything for you. So I think that was a mindset shift for our company, for people who are used to controlling everything, to say, I don't care how you build them. We can build them if you want. There's some we're not going to touch. And if you want to do it, we'd like you to do it here.
Right.
And how do we incent you or help you feel comfortable that this is going to work for you?
How did you change the culture internally where things had to be deterministic, had to be reliable because of the importance of what you build in healthcare and the like, to much more of an open standards and APIs where you don't know what's going to happen when somebody taps into this?
Well, I think it's that marriage of the software engineers and the hardware engineers coming together. We did a lot with lean methodology, especially lean startup, and a lot of the things that were incubated here at Stanford. With Steve Blank and Eric Rees. We brought in Eric Rees as a coach. And I remember the first time we brought him in, sort of the thought bubble you could see in everybody's head was like, okay, smarty pants, I know you know software, what do you know about hardware? 2 years later, people were saying to him, I know you know hardware, but what do you know about software? So that idea of sort of the agile, just get it going, you know, that you had to think differently in software. So basically software had to kind of lead those implementations and say to the hardware guys, learn from me. And we had to incent people differently. We had different metrics in terms of speed, capital allocation, throughput, in terms of how long you're waiting for a product to be developed. So we had to change our measurement systems as well.
And at your level then in the organization, who's brokering or then arbitrating then the two speeds and when things need to come together versus, because you could easily slow down the software business because the hardware, you know, people get too connected to it. Like, do you ever have to kind of separate things, or do you want it as integrated as possible?
Well, you want it as integrated as possible, but you also don't want to lose the customer.
Right.
So whatever you do, you want to make sure you have to bring your customer along, but you want to move at market speed, I'd say. You want to make sure you're not slowing your customer down when they want to go faster. And so that always has to become the determination. If it becomes an internal fight of hardware versus software, but the customer's left out, not good. So again, lean startup has given us the tools to think much faster with our customers.
Again, given the diversity of the businesses, it's probably hard, but was there ever like a North Star or a company that you guys looked up to and said, hey, we want to model our future off of this type of business? Or was it multiple companies? What was the framework that you were operating on when you moved from industrial to digital?
I think it was a mosaic. There were a lot of different pieces. I mean, you know, you have to look at like an Apple model as a platform, what happened with iTunes and the applications, and understand sort of network orchestration and platform business models. That was something you had to look at, and how that's impacted other industries. You had to look at just a lot of different companies that changed their business models. So, you know, going from sort of for us, we had some great history of transitioning our service model. We were looking at other people. So the integrators you talked about, the Accentures of the world, how do they do it? What can we learn from them? I'd say there were a lot of different models.
Anything? We had Tony Fidel in here at the beginning of the course. Has Nest ever been? Have you learned much from Nest? Has Nest learned from you guys? I mean, that's another example of a sort of fully integrated hardware, software, cloud, IoT. He doesn't like the word IoT or the concept, but was there any kind of shared understanding between your worlds?
Well, I think have great admiration for what Tony was able to do quickly. I'll tell you one thing we did. It didn't work, but we launched a partnership and a series of experiments on the consumer side to have connected home, because we felt it was a good laboratory, that eventually consumer data is going to feed into the energy value chain. And so we partnered with a startup called Quirky and created a bunch of connected products, had our own, at the time, naively, Nest Killer, which basically ended up killing Quirky. But the reality is that you have to plant those seeds to understand and learn. And if we hadn't done that, I think we wouldn't have learned some of the key things we're doing now with connected light bulbs.
So Quirky is that's actually a fun example then. You brought it up, not me. So basically, how do you guys deal with then taking risks, and how do you create an environment that has allowed for Quirkies to exist, which is a company you guys put a lot of money into. The concept was fairly novel, could have worked, maybe not, didn't. How do you guys deal with that?
Well, I'd say first of all, I think in Jeff Immelt you have a CEO and chairman who's a very market-focused CEO. He's had to drive growth from new sources since the day he got in there. And so he has this great attitude of we have to try things. I don't think every CEO comes to the job with that, and he's maintained that, despite a lot of people who think maybe we shouldn't have tried as many things. But I think he has an appetite for us trying things. He knows it's important. And we've had to just continue to evaluate our models. And one of the things I think has been very successful for us, we have a ventures team just on Sand Hill Road here. And yeah, we partner and invest in startups, but more and more we're incubating our own businesses. And so we're trying to create those challenger brands, challenger companies within the mothership, and we're happy to talk about that. But I think you have to create space for those ideas. You have to partner. You can't do everything yourself. If there's one thing we've changed our culture, is that you can't do it alone. And I mean, I think about our relationship as a company. I'd say you can offer if I've got it right, but I think it was tough for you to come into GE because everybody's like, we can do it ourselves, right? We don't need Box. We can do it ourselves. And that never happened, did it?
I remember that conversation. Yeah.
And so you have to come back and say, well, really, we can't do it ourselves.
No, we couldn't.
Actually, we need Aaron.
But most people can't, so it's fine. So,
yeah, but that is the fallacy of companies. You think you can do it all yourself.
If you look at the company 5 to 10 years out, how do you think it changes and looks as an organization? Where do you think revenue streams come from versus where it is today?
Well, I think you have more revenue streams from more sources. So this is one of the lessons I feel like I've learned dating back to my NBC days of digital, is the pie in the digital world, the pie gets bigger, the pieces get smaller. So you have to work harder for more pieces of the pie. So basically you're layering on revenue stream, revenue stream, revenue stream. It makes the finance team crazy. The cost, if you're not careful, it can, in the early stages is more expensive until you get to entitlement. So I think that's one of the things that we're just now getting our head around.
But do you think that, that's really interesting. So the pie gets bigger, the pieces get smaller. Do the pieces have the same toppings? Or is there,
no.
Okay, no. Okay. I don't even know what I meant by that, so that's great that you know.
It's like one of those weird birthday cakes from Carvel.
Yeah. Okay. But is there synergy between the pieces?
Well, I think there has to be some synergy. I would say the only asterisk on that rule is if you get there early and first, and you have more, you can have access to more pieces in the platform strategy, right? I mean, look at the Facebooks, the Apples. They have more pieces because they're counting on other people to bring them the data. And so you can start to be a toll collector in some of these models. So those are some of the things we're trying to get our head around. And I don't know where it's all going to end up for us, but those are the things you have to think about real time.
So when you think about then, what was the revenue number we said? 230 billion is what you said?
No, the market cap's 270.
130.
Revenue is about 130.
130. Good. Okay. So 130 billion dollars. It's hard to grow that with a toll collecting business model, right? So do you see all of this as grow the pie of the industrial business because we just have smarter, more powerful technology than anybody else, so people want to buy more of our things? Or do you actually see a world where the software part of the business grows the pie measurably, and that is a big chunk of whether it's the toll on the usage of the software or it's just selling the software itself?
So if you consider GE, almost 60% of our business is service-based anyway.
All right.
So in some ways, we're reinventing the service model. I think an installed base of technology doesn't go away. The value of it may change over time. You're trying to prevent it from being commoditized, but you can't run an airline without jet engines. You can't run a railroad without locomotives. So I think we're still in those big iron businesses where few competitors, huge technical advantage, so it's not easy necessarily to come into those markets, but it's not enough. And so the service model is really what's changing. And so you will continue to have contractual service agreements, which we've had, but now you will layer on those additional sort of subscription models, something as a service. It really becomes GE as a service to help you run your business better.
Did you want to?
I'll go after.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Well, because I'm really excited about data right now. Okay. So you said data and you said toll collecting. What do you see as the synergy then between the different businesses? Is there a requirement that everything needs to go into one major, data platform and then we leverage it across all the businesses? Is there a sort of unifying principle about how you're going to use data for the business going forward?
Well, I think our unifying principle is assets under management. So that's a new metric for us. How many assets can you get GEs or others that are connected to your cloud, your Predix industrial cloud? So again, if we're investing in industrial scale data and analytics, all that goes with it, the correlations. I mean, one jet engine, I think I have my math right. The one jet engine flight is like a terabyte of data. Imagine you're running a whole airline. Imagine if someone like us and we're servicing 200 airlines. So we're talking huge amounts of data. And so I think you have to, that's some of what you have to think through in those models.
Are you publishing your assets under management numbers yet?
Not yet, but we will. But every business has a target for what they think their assets under management, GEs or others. Again, if other people are building apps on our platform, those are assets that we can, the data's private. But the ability to take the insights from the data, and if you're flying a jet engine over the sort of rough, harsh terrain of the Middle East versus flying it over, North America, you have different wear and tear, and the more kind of use cases and scenarios you can get in there, the better you can predict the rate of failure or the rate of how hot it is. So the more data you have, the better you can predict what's going to happen. And that's really what we're offering, is that sort of predictability, that maintenance, that ability to run your company better.
If we were sitting here in 4 years and it didn't go as you had hoped and planned, what would be your best guess as to why? What would have gotten in the way? What keeps you up at night?
Well, I think, can we go fast enough? Can we go fast enough? And are our customers ready? In some ways, I think for us, it's like, let's get things connected and then let's all figure it out. So the revenue will follow. We're already at $15 billion of software sales. So that feels good. And starting from just a couple billion. So that feels pretty good to us, that we're moving in the right way. We have productivity targets. I think we're looking to get $5 billion worth of productivity.
So how do you get your teams to go faster?
Well, you incent them to go faster. So you're incenting them on velocity and speed. How fast can you get these assets under management? How many new revenue sources and streams of revenue can you, a paying customer is a lot more valuable than a development customer. 2 customers are more valuable than just 1 customer. So I think there are those kind of sort of what you'd imagine in a seed growing company, early stage to big kind of metrics.
Well, obviously GE is one of the things it's most well known for is its leadership tracks and leadership development and growing leaders and all of that. And has this idea of digital sort of started to come through in your leadership development tracks? How do you grow the next era of leaders to think like you are thinking and have driven? Because you have this unique experience on the media side, seeing that disruption. So it's sort of core to what you've had to deal with. How do you ensure that other leaders are learning like what's going to be happening in their business or their particular industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a couple things happened to us. That as digital was taking off, we had GE Capital face and really the company face into one of our biggest crises in history with the financial downturn. And this last year announced we're shedding GE Capital and helped us focus. But what we also realized is there was a lot of bureaucracy that had crept into the company. Financial services, healthcare. I mean, so we were naturally slow because of the fear that sort of came out of the downturn, the less ability to feel good about managing risk. That comes along the same time digital, that just doesn't work. So we've had to just lead a whole cultural revolution. We call it FastWorks. It's really lean startup plus a lot of other things that we've brought into the culture, more of a VC-like approach to funding and moving fast. And so we've just announced we're revamping our whole leadership development program. And digital is at the core of everything, every way we're developing our next leaders in the company.
But what do you think you have to train those leaders on then? Like, what is the new skill?
It's the responsiveness, agility, the decentralized. Luckily, we globalized in the early part of this decade. I'd say around 2000. Well, really last decade. In this, we spent a huge effort to go where the growth was globally. That helped us understand how to operate in a decentralized world. Probably we were ready for digital in that kind of arena, but. I think your page here is really, really helpful of what we're trying to get the leadership team
good
to do.
Endorsement. Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you.
I'm taking that page back, actually.
Yeah, no. We can license it to you.
Yeah.
And do you see it as, I mean, clearly it's not sort of binary, like it's not one or the other,
No.
but have you fused them together in ways that is your own unique model? Like how do you, I mean, because you're not getting rid of Six Sigma, are you?
No.
Okay, so, and there's then the responsiveness and Agile on the other side. Is the same person going to have to learn how to do both? Is that just going to be two DNAs in the organization?
Well, and Rob knows this from the days of Six Sigma in GE. I mean, this was the Jack Welch hallmark at GE, and it was very powerful. It was all about quality, and it helps you scale faster. There's a lot of great things about Six Sigma. But trust me, when I was at NBC, we did not need to know how to do Six Sigma. And there are parts of the company that didn't need to, but it was forced down. And there's a little bit of risk aversion that comes with that. And you want your jet engine to not be, I don't know, you want it to be 50 Sigma if that's even possible. So that's part of what's happening now is you have to use the tool for the application, but you can't expect everybody to do everything the exact same way. So yes, you still need the efficiency in the Six Sigma to operate at scale, but not everybody needs to do it.
Right.
And so some of the lean methodology helps you iterate with your customer, get a product out faster, understand, but then when it's ready to scale, you better know how to use Six Sigma to get it out the way it needs to be.
And how has, I mean, you guys are in, far enough in where you must have seen parts of the organization that just can't adapt. Like they're just not going to be able to make it to the other side on this fusion of digital and industrial. How do you deal with that? Is that like a full and immersive retraining? Is that okay, we're going to have to actually sideline that organization? How are you dealing with the fact that you have hundreds of thousands of people that have to move along with this journey?
So I'll give you, I spent a lot of time on the commercial side. So let me give you an example of just even the funnel, the pyramid that we're looking at in terms of the sale. At the base, you still have product sales. I mean, you still have to go and talk to the technical leader at the railroad and say, here's all the great specs of our engine. The middle is really your value sell. It's really a much more focused on some of those outcomes I talked about. And the top is really just a very consultative, let me sit next to the CFO, help you run this railroad better. And we've had to, so most of our base was at that product level. And we've had to bring in sort of the value sellers and also those consultative. Some people make the transition, many don't. And so you either keep the people who are really good at the product and you bring in new people, or you move the other people up. And that's happening in every function in the company. Some people self-select out. Some people make the transition. So you have to offer training and development, but you also have to be very honest with people who don't feel comfortable. This is the way the world's going, and maybe there's something else somewhere else that you want to do it.
And they go to Honeywell or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So you guys have. Last question would be then. You have. I think at this point, sort of fully immersed yourselves in Silicon Valley. You're doing venture capital. You're doing significant partnerships, both internally on the internal IT side as well as externally on customer-facing stuff. What is there an overall framework on what you decide to build, buy, invest, partner in, and do you see the things like the venture capital side? Is that stuff that you ultimately want to acquire? You just want to stay close to? You want to, just support from an ecosystem standpoint? How do you think about all of the startup relationships that you guys are building?
Yeah, I think it's all the above. I mean, I'd say you guys probably learned the classic business school 3-box, core, adjacent, new. Really still guides us and helpful here. And so we tend to use our venture capability for the new, because that's really hard to do always in the core. And then there's some interesting hybrids on the adjacent. So I think that's still a very good framework. We want to partner for speed and sharing risk and reward. You want to invest in a startup because they give you a window. They're able to move faster in certain cases. Maybe we want to acquire them. Maybe we just want to have a stake in it. We have this saying, do you want to be 100% of nothing or 20% of something that's going to work? And so again, it's a way to, the way I like to think about it, it's sort of what we call position capital. So it's a speed, and it's also a way to think about capital allocation, and you're positioning yourself for when the change shows up. And you're ready for it. We're doing it with our lighting business right now, where we're actually transforming our LED business into an energy business. And it involves solar and storage and on-site power generation. That hasn't scaled yet, but it's going to. And we need to be there and ready to take it.
But in the history of corporate venture capital, it's especially companies coming into the valley, putting up stands on Redwood, Sand Hill Road. there's a lot of sort of dead bodies of that process. What are you guys doing something uniquely different? Do you have a different perspective than other corporate venture capital groups have done?
Well, I think it's not, I mean, sure, there's a part of the portfolio that's a return on investment.
Yep.
Yes, we want some of these investments to pay off. We want the fund to be self-sustaining. But there's a whole strategic imperative of, can we partner? I'll give you a good example. Right now in the railroad business, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones are very important. They're important in the power business to survey power lines. So we've invested in a number of drone companies, software companies, because they're going to help. Together we're going to get there faster. And so that helps. Like, are we going to go buy airware? No, but the fact that we can put their software platform together with our navigation platform means we can both get there faster.
Does that sort of shake up, we're over time, but does that sort of shake up the organization a bit, which says,
yes.
hey, I mean, we've got this airware thing, if you can't do that or learn from them,
yes.
what does that do culturally?
Well, culturally, it comes back to that question of people usually go, well, wait a minute, but I was going to do that. Yeah, but you can't. You don't. You know, we had a little internal contest recently where we asked people to pitch out ideas. We're going to fund them for a year, sort of seed stage funding them.
Okay.
And one of them is a drone software navigation. It's awesome, but it's like number 10 on their top 7 things that they are focused on. But 10's going to happen. So how do we use ventures to create the momentum so that when 10 rises up in 3 to 5 years, we're ready to scale it? You need to keep it at just the right level, and I've learned a lot about timing, and you can be too early, and we all know companies are usually accused of being too late, but you can also be too early.
Right. Awesome. Beth Comstock, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.